Happy Frasier Crane Day. Or is it Merry Frasier Crane Day? I can never remember.
I'm just a touch skittish today. All this fuss over me. Say, is it possible to get these two to go? I thought a walk might do us some good. Get a little exercise. And maybe I can stroll away my jitters.
Well, all right, I could use the fresh air. I'm feeling a tad sluggish.
Oh, up late last night?
Well, I'm afraid so. As usual, I left it at the last minute to write all my Frasier Crane Day cards.
I just wanted to let you know about my study group.
Oh, don't be a fuddy-duddy. I'll be your study buddy.
I'm about to embark on one of the great challenges of my scientific career.
This work right here is going to change history.
I think this is going to be our greatest mission.
I don't have time to study. I'll never get into Stanford.
I got big plans for you tonight. I got maps, I got charts. I got to see you through this because my credibility is on the line.
It's at this point that you'll want to start taking notes.
Welcome to the Sitcom Study, the podcast where we contemplate the TV shows we grew up with and search for the truth and wisdom within the tropes and cliches. And Amy, what is the monumentous event that brings us here tonight?
Well, it's our 100th episode, Jay.
The 100th episode of our podcast.
That's right. Yeah. It didn't take us 5 seasons to get there, but that's because we do more, well, at least our first season, we did more than 20 episodes.
Yeah, we prided ourselves on going a full year, putting out a new episode every single week, and we did that. And this year, we've got some reruns and stuff in the mix because life is short and, you know, we can't always keep up.
Because we have other jobs that pay us.
Yeah. But, 100 times over the last 2 years or so, we have watched 4 or more sitcoms in our living room and come down here to our makeshift podcast studio where the likes of Scott Baio and the entire cast of Head of the Class beam at us from autographed
I love that you list
pictures.
The ones that you care about.
I'm listing the ones that are signed, to be fair. Scott Baio, we have off of eBay, not off of personal encounters.
Yeah, I
we
think
have
you would
signed
melt if you met Scott Baio.
From Scott Baio and the entire cast of Head of the Class. The Rain prior, later on.
Yeah, the later
seasons.
years.
Anyway, we come down here to this little makeshift podcast studio and we record our podcast about tropes and sitcoms and all that. So look, I'll ask you right off the bat, if you want me to go first because you're on the spot, any thoughts, any overall, takeaways? Do you feel like it's different than it was back in episode 1? Have we learned anything? Do you just, any overall feelings about having done this 100 times?
So I think that's a really big accomplishment. I think that it's wild to think that we have done this 100 times. Like, yay, us. Also, I know way too much about TV now. Like, when I am in the world talking to people, I'll be like, oh yeah, that was like this episode of whatever, some random show. And people are like, what are you talking about? And I work in an international context. So a lot of the people that I work with didn't even grow up in this country. So 100% didn't see these shows.
So when you're bringing up Give Me a Break, nobody understands
knows what
that.
I'm talking about. Exactly. So yeah, I don't know. You go.
Well, I'll say a couple things. I think the feedback that we get most often, and so maybe I'll start with that. First and foremost, the absolute best thing I think about doing a podcast is when people reach out to us.
Yeah.
So I'll say off the top what's in the blurb at the very end. We have our email, sitcomstudypodcast@gmail.com, and we're on Instagram, Sitcom Study Podcast on Instagram. We love it when people reach out with ideas, with their thoughts, opinions, whatever.
We tend to use them. Like, we appreciate it.
Yeah. And so that's the thing that just sort of shows you much more than the numbers or anything, that people actually listen, they like it, they're thinking about it. And I think the feedback that we get most often that's really sort of flattering is that they like the premise, that we're not just doing another watch along. We're not just doing another, let's watch all the episodes of True Jackson VP because nobody's done that one. And, and what I think I've been pleasantly surprised about now that we've been doing it so long is that it hasn't really we have not come to the limits of this thing of coming up with
there are
sitcom
still
tropes.
shows that we haven't watched.
Well, it's not the sitcoms
we were
I'd be
talking
worried
but
about.
tropes
It's the
as well.
tropes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we definitely haven't run out of those. But every now and then we'll see these hilarious things come up on our YouTube about like the, one season or not even one season. They were like one episode shows in the 70s and 80s. Those are hilarious. There's so much bad TV out there.
Yeah, and just the fact that we've done these 100 episodes based on this idea of, we track the trope across the sitcoms, and we still haven't done the getting a pet or the, my mom's dating a new person. Like a lot of the basic tropes, the musical episodes, that was like the whole kind of
like my
germ of
original
this
idea. Yeah,
like we're still saving them.
Exactly. And there's one of the episodes that we watched for this podcast, we watched 100th episodes of famous shows. So our first one that we're going to look at is I Love Lucy. And that was back in the days before they did a big deal about like, it's your 100th episode. It just was another show. It wasn't some big, appointment viewing kind of spectacle like they kind of do now. But yeah, that one, the premise of that show is Lucy cries wolf. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a trope we've never done. We would totally take that seed of an idea and then we'll plan a whole other episode with other shows that have cried wolf. Yeah.
And so, of course, we're going to do with this episode what some of these sitcoms do and try to figure out a way to tie in the 100 thing into the concept. So we're watching 100th episodes of sitcoms for our 100th episode. And I have to say, this is the latest example of my aging mind kind of failing me. When I came to you with this idea, I think we should do 100th episodes because I know there are some good ones. The thing that really was first in my mind was The Simpsons. And I was wrong on so many levels. I had it in my mind that there was a 100th episode Simpsons Spectacular. And in that episode, they did a thing where they show you different like spin-offs of The Simpsons as like little sketches. And there's one with
Is this something
Principal
you
Skinner.
made up or was it just a different show?
What
it was like the 300th episode or something?
And then when I found out that the 100th episode of The Simpsons is just some show, I was like, I guess it was the 300th episode. No, it's the 138th episode Spectacular. But that show...
Was it the end of a season?
No, it was a spoof on that concept. They were spoofing 100th episode.
But they didn't do it on their 100th episode.
No,
they did it
on
38 later.
And that show is just like a behind-the-scenes sort of like celebration. The spin-off thing is a completely different episode from some later season.
Oh
so
my
I was
goodness.
just mixing up all kinds of
putting them all
things.
together.
Yeah. So that did not end up making our lineup. What are our shows? What did we watch?
We are watching I Love Lucy, Season 4, Episode 3, Lucy Cries Wolf. Frasier, Season 5, Episode 4, The 1000th Show. The Middle, Season 5, Episode 4, The 100th, and Blackish, Season 5, Episode 4, Purple Rain. So you'll notice as we get into the 90s and into the 2000s, things start to kind of even out. They're doing the same number of shows per season. They're not doing 25, 24, 26. They're doing a little bit less. So all of our later episodes, Frasier, The Middle, and Blackish, are Season 5, Episode 4.
Yeah.
So it takes 5 seasons for sitcoms nowadays, 5 years to get to the 100th episode.
Well, and you know how the 100th episode is considered their threshold for syndication.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like an exact thing or if that's just one of those, little showbiz things that people know about. But it makes sense.
Yeah, that would be surprising nowadays because it takes 5 years to get there.
Yeah, but I think it's just a matter of having enough content to play it every day.
Oh, I see.
It's just like they're going to do this deal.
Because it's basically 2 years or a year and a half.
Yeah,
if
like
it's us.
You think of the shows that we grew up. This is a big part of my sitcom experience as a kid. Like I've talked about all the time, watching Charles in Charge and stuff on syndication.
Yeah.
Where it wasn't prime time. It was 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock when your parents were cooking dinner. And they would show those shows every day. And a lot of times they would show them in twos. If they were shows
Right.
that went on a little while, they'd be like, oh,
But
yeah.
that happened because Charles in Charge was produced in syndication.
Well, that's true. Charles
it
in
was
Charge
not
is
one
a
that
little
got
bit
to
of an
the
outlier.
100.
No,
yeah.
that's true. That complicates things. But in general, I'm just saying I think they need those 100 episodes because otherwise they're going to run out of content in 6 weeks or
Right.
whatever it is. So yeah, that's why, this is considered this sort of like rule of thumb for these shows that have this whole sort of treasure trove of content. And yeah, like you said, it becomes standardized. I guess none of these were victims of writer strikes or anything where they had weird, irregular seasons that ended up throwing their numbering off. But Ricky and Lucy is before we get to all that. That's when we had all these weird shows where it's like, oh yeah, the Andy Griffith Show. Of course they had 74 episodes in their first season. Like, why wouldn't
Usually
they?
it was under 20. It was under 30. It was usually somewhere between 20 and 25.
The 60s Batman show with Adam West has, I think, 60 episodes in its first
but wasn't
season.
that,
It is
again, one of
wild.
those ones that was like, it was 4 afternoon syndication. It didn't run at night.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, so we're only in season 4 for Lucy. So I guess the other thing that we should start talking about is just the idea that by the time you're in this 100th episode, whether it's your 4th season, 5th season or whatever, you're really settled in. You know, you're beyond
You know
that.
who your characters are. They've done, just like we were saying, we've done this so many times now. I feel like we've definitely settled in.
Yeah. So I wonder with Lucy, we've watched her a handful of times now, but we don't totally have the context to really address how much it's changed. My feeling is Lucy, it's like Garfield in the comics. Like this was the same thing on day one as it was 30 years later.
Well,
their
and
dynamic, her whole persona, it doesn't seem to me like something that gradually evolved.
Oh, definitely not. I think the evolution of the side characters is maybe more prevalent. And that was due to, the character who played Ethel was really put off by the fact that she was, wifed up with this much older man who also was an alcoholic and couldn't remember his lines and everything. And so you do see her wearing less frumpy dresses by season 4. But that was the actress kind of saying, these are things I need to have happen behind the scenes. So it wasn't necessarily an evolution of the character per se. It was more
Ethel gets more skimpy.
Yeah, not skimpy, but she
more
she's
flattering.
allowed. Yeah, exactly. She's allowed to show off her waist in ways that she wasn't, or in earlier episodes.
Well, Fred's certainly showing off his waist whether he wants to or not.
He always wears the same thing. But what in terms of evolution, I think we can even track this right down to the happenings in the episode. The last time we watched Lucy, she was out on the ledge.
Yes.
And had
meeting
crawled out,
Superman.
exactly, had crawled out the window because she was going to be Superman, and they didn't think Superman was going to get there for the little Ricky's birthday party. Well, now in this episode, she's out on the ledge again, but that's because she's trying to prove that, she's trying to prove to herself that Ricky cares enough about her to come home and rescue her if something bad happens. And so now she's hiding because her friends and Ricky have all figured out that she was calling in a fake.
Yeah, the show is called Lucy Cries Wolf. You can pretty much, infer the whole thing from there. Just to slow down for a second, I like that we're not spending too much time on this plot, but that first scene that sort of kicks this all off, I think it's like this is why you watch the old sitcoms. The idea that they took the time to have these little slapsticky moments like something out of a Laurel and Hardy thing.
With the two of them in the paper.
Yeah, this one is like this silent scene. They're at the breakfast table. It's Ricky. He's reading the paper. Lucy says, "Can I have some to read it?"
No, she says, do you want some more coffee? And he doesn't answer her because he's so engrossed in his paper. She asks 3 times and eventually just fills up his cup. And then without looking away from the paper, he reaches down, he He picks up his cup. He goes to sip, and it's brand new full hot coffee. And he's like, oh, you're scalding a guy. And she gives him shit for making her sit there silently looking at the back of his paper while they're having breakfast together. And he's like, oh, Lucy, you know, like he's going to apologize. And then he hands her a section. Do you want a section? And she's like, ugh. So she opens the paper. Now they're both reading, but the minute she, you know, looks at her paper, she notices something on the back of his and puts her paper down and then pulls his paper closer to her. And then he's like, you want this one? Let's trade. And so they trade. And then the same thing happens again. She isn't paying attention. And he's like, what is it? The paper's always, you know, greener on the other person or whatever.
Yeah, that's the classical bit, I think, is just her always being more interested in whatever is on the back of his paper.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just one of those old-timey, just fun little moments. And then, you know, her attention is caught by this burglary article where she reads this thing all about how the husband was working late and the wife called him to report a burglar, and the husband thought it was just her imagination. And so when he came home, the wife was bound and gagged, and they
had been like totally robbed. And so she's like, Ricky, if I called you at work, would you come home and protect me? And he sees this immediately for what it is, and he lays it on thick. And then she asks 2 more times, and when he does it the 3rd time, she sort of realizes that he's laying it on too thick and that she's being kind of condescended to. Well, so she's like, okay, I'll call your bluff.
Yeah. There's some funny sitcom stuff here. When she's first explaining the whole situation and the article says like, and they're now, you know, impoverished because they had no insurance or something. And Ricky goes like, oh, could you imagine it not being insured or something? That classic kind of thing. And then when she's pressing him like, what would you really do if I called you at work? What if you were in the middle of a show? And he goes, honey, if I had the slightest inkling that you were in any real danger, right? And so that's his like little sort of lawyer's clause. And then when he leaves, there's this great moment of her just going, Yeah,
because, well, and especially on the 3rd time she asks him, he's like, I would do anything for you. I would protect you to the ends of the earth. And she just, like, you can kind of see that she's like, I'm going to call this bluff on this. So, so she goes about her day. She's cleaning, and she is coming into the kitchen in her little, like, she looks like Rosie the Riveter in her cleaning gear, but she's got her hair up in a little handkerchief, and, you know, she's got a little sort of pants outfit on, which is not very loosey. That's how you know she's cleaning. And she comes into the kitchen and she sees the paper again on the table, and it reminds her that she wants to pull this stunt. So she calls Ricky all crazy. Oh, Ricky, come home right now. There's a prowler. He's big and he's got bushy eyebrows and he's peeking in.
Yeah, this was the surprise to me. I could have guessed the story of this episode just by the title.
Of course.
But what I would have thought would be that she saw some like window washer and mistook him for a prowler. I wouldn't have guessed that she had the gall to just straight up fabricate this whole thing and just demand that he come home as a test.
Right.
But that's what she does.
That's what she does. And then immediately Ethel and what's the guy's name I always forget? Fred. Ethel and Fred burst in the door. You know, one's got a baseball bat, one's got a frying pan. They're going to take out this prowler. And Fred's like, where is he? Where is he? Where'd you see him? You know, and Ethel's like, are you okay? Come on. You know, like they're going to protect her.
Yeah.
And she, you know, she tries to keep up the ruse for them. And then they are like, they realize she's full of it. So then they go back to their apartment.
There's also a part, just love this in the old sitcoms, where she jumps on their line. Did you notice it? She says, oh, like it's the beginning of her next line.
Yep.
Just things like that, that sort of Ed Wood style. No, keep it going.
They
We got
just
to bang
leave
out
it
3
in.
more of these. Come on.
Yep.
And so, they're onto her. After they leave, she does, this is the Cries wolf thing. She doubles down, right? She trashes the apartment herself.
Yep.
And then calls Ricky again.
Yes.
And then once again.
And hold on. And says, he made me lie to Fred and Ethel when they were here. So, you know, they don't think it's real, but it's really happening. Please help me. And then she's like, oh no, I'm not talking to anybody. Oh, it's just a super.
Yeah.
Ah!
She does a full-on radio play by herself. Like, oh, take that, Robert. What's that? No, I'm not talking to any. Oh no, don't hurt me.
Exactly.
Yeah, like banging pots and pans together and stuff. Yeah, and so then her solution, like you mentioned before, just like in the Superman episode.
Oh, but wait, she hides in the closet first.
Okay.
Because Ethel comes back, and she comes back by herself thinking this is just another one of Lucy's tricks. And then she sees the apartment trashed, and she can't find Lucy anywhere.
Yeah.
Lucy's hiding in the closet. And so then she runs and gets Fred, and he comes in. And while they're checking the bedroom, Lucy sneaks out of the closet and goes out on the ledge. So they won't be able to find her anywhere because she's realized they think it's a gag. They think she's faking it. And they're only like hanging on to the maybe belief that she's not faking it because they can't find her. So she's like, well, I'll show them. They won't find me. So she sneaks out onto the balcony, and then they call Ricky because they can't find her.
Now, this is just wild. I mean, do you remember what season it was that Superman thing was from?
Oh, I can look it up.
Because, like, just watching these two back to back, it is absurd. Like, it's the same set, you know, so except for a window is missing.
Right, like they have a flat brick wall that is at the 90-degree angle to the ledge that she's on, whereas last time that she crawled along that ledge and there was another
she was
apartment
crawling
window
from
over there.
Different from the neighboring apartment. But besides that, it's the same ledge, the same drain pipe and everything. And so we're watching 2 episodes of Lucy in a row where her solution to a problem is to climb out on this window ledge, and she has the same like brush with death every time.
Yeah. Well, not so much because she doesn't almost fall off.
She gets because she gets startled by things they say when Lucy and Fred, or when Ethel and Fred are yelling.
She does. That
was
she has
little
season
moments.
6, so this one is first.
All right, so this is, I mean, who knows if it's her first time on this ledge,
right,
but
this
it's the
one's at
earlier
least
one.
before that one.
Yeah. Now, what struck me, Fred and Ethel call Ricky at work, right? To say, we do think it's one of her tricks but
we can't find her anywhere, and your apartment is trash.
Yeah, and so Fred is like, look, Ricky, we still think she's faking, but she's unaccounted for. And then he says, oh yeah, and don't worry, we'll take care of little Ricky until you get home.
Yeah.
What? Where is little Ricky in all this? Like this kid has not been seen. I guess this is, you can't get
very
the little kid on set
very
all the
often
time.
that's true. So little Ricky in 2 seasons is turning like 5 or 6 because that's the birthday party. So right now he's probably still a baby. So he's just not.
So he probably shouldn't be left alone by Lucy going out the window. Like the fact that they were
60s, they all did. Remember, we were feral children back in the 70s and 80s.
It was just so funny that they just can't, like, they would be better off just not mentioning him and letting you forget about little Ricky.
But they did. They didn't mention him at any point until right now.
Yeah,
when
and that's why
every
it was so
adult is
striking.
going to leave the apartment. And so, that's when they mention him because he would be left alone otherwise. So, so then Ricky's there in the next scene and they're all kind of standing in front of this window and Lucy can hear the whole conversation out on the ledge.
Yeah, he thinks she's yelling tiger, one of Ricky's little malapropisms. Instead of crying wolf, she's yelling tiger.
Oh, right. That's what Ricky calls crying wolf. Yeah, exactly. Not little Ricky, big Ricky.
Yeah.
And so they're going back and forth and they're like, oh my goodness, she really isn't anywhere. She really isn't anywhere in the house. She wouldn't have left little Ricky alone and gone out. And it's all
except she would.
Except she would. But like what, this is terrifying. Like we are actually, should we call the police? I think we might have to. And Lucy's just like grinning ear to ear that they're, taking it hook, line, and sinker. And she's like, all right, I finally got him.
They start like eulogizing her, basically.
Yes,
they're like, she was such a nice person.
Right. And she's like, oh, that's so sad. And then they get a call they get a call from a woman across the street who can see Lucy on the ledge and is calling to let them know that she's out there. I hope everything's okay in your life, but just so you know, your wife's out on the ledge.
Yeah, this is the New York City of yesteryear, where not only do you know your neighbors in the next apartment, you know your neighbors across the street.
Building across the street. Exactly.
6 flights up.
Exactly. Well, and it could have just been that,
they were friends.
Or that she called the front and they were like, hey, who's in apartment 16, whatever. Again, though, that would be a little weird. They would know what number. But anyway, so Ricky plays it off as though this is a call from somebody at work.
Yeah, he puts his hand on the thing to hang up the phone and goes like, oh, okay, thanks for letting me know that you'll be late to work tonight or whatever.
Or that you'll have those, things for the set
the
or something.
And so now it's Ricky's turn to play a little joke on Lucy,
That's right.
Turn the
They're
tables.
Turn the tables on her. He writes on a piece of paper while he's out loud explaining what the phone call was about. He writes on a piece of paper what the phone call was really about. So Fred and Ethel join in and they're like, oh, we're going to get Lucy's goat good. She's out there listening to everything we said. So then they start eulogizing her again, but start going toward the way of like, all right, well, we're going to need to give away her clothes.
Yeah, let's give away her clothes.
And all of her belongings. Hey, Lucy, or hey, Ethel, do you want her really nice fur? And, what are we going to do about little Ricky? Well, it's hard to be a single father. Yeah, you're probably going to want to get remarried again.
You got to remarry Ricky. It's the right thing to do for the benefit of little Ricky.
And this is when we see Lucy start to lose her balance because she's like, you wait 1 second. So then she bursts in and they're like, we caught you. And she was like, you didn't catch me for anything. I went out there to hide from the burglars and I can't believe you're in here talking about how you would, just get remarried and you don't even care about me. And again, this time she triples down. She's like, I wasn't lying.
She says verbatim, a man came in and chased me around and around, right? This is her story, that a burglar came in and just chased her around the living room like, Bozo the Clown style. And then she had to hide on the window ledge.
Yep. And so that is her story. So then we cut to later that evening or the next night or something. They're playing cards. They're having a nice evening together. And Lucy is still all bent out of shape that they don't believe her because she is going to be believed. She's not going to be found out in her scheme. And so she's being all pouty.
Yeah,
and,
she's moping on the stairs outside.
Well, she won't. She says no, she's not coming back to play bridge. She's like, it's fine if you guys don't believe me, whatever. All I wanted to do was know that you love me. And now I know that you don't. And all of you are that way. So she's pouting out on the stairs. And guess what? The burglars that went and burgled that other apartment down the street are there, and they tie her up and leave her in the basement.
These are burglars with fedora hats, like the old-timey hats, and the face masks like they're robbing a train.
Yes,
and like
it's handkerchiefs tied around their face,
they tie her up. Again, I guess this is just such a charming notion of burglars and crime.
They pick her up.
Nobody hurts anybody.
No, well, that's the thing. They pick her up, and we get that great scene of them hauling her down to the basement, and she's screaming, "Ricky, help me, Ricky! Yeah. They're here!" And nobody's going out into the hall.
No, Ricky goes, "Oh, that's a great taking away effect you're doing with your voice,
right?
Lucy."
Yeah, and the muffling thing too, because they kept, and then she bit one of the burglars and started screaming. And so, they were just not coming to her rescue. They locked her, these burglars tied her up in the basement, and then she somehow hops her way back up all the stairs from the basement and knocks on her apartment door and is all tied up. And Fred and Ethel and Ricky are like, "Hey, that's really great. How'd you get it? How'd you get all those ties around you like that without using your hands?"
Yeah, and so they still don't believe her.
All
the show
way to
ends
the end,
with the three of them playing bridge while Lucy hops around in the background.
She's hopping to each of them being like, "Why don't you believe?" Because they've taken the gag out of her mouth, and she's just yelling in their ears, "Why don't you believe me? Why don't you believe me? It really happened. It really happened." And they are just ignoring everything about it.
Yeah.
So in terms of being a special 100th episode, generally Lucy gets her comeuppance and she takes it well, which doesn't happen in this episode. They have this whole extra act, like Act 4, where she really does get taken in, you know, like the story of the boy cries wolf, right? She really does get taken in by the burglars, and then they don't believe her. And so it's funny how doing an old story actually turns the pattern of an I Love Lucy episode on its head a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, look, there's no real trope to track here other than, does it feel special, you know? And I feel like it's definitely, you know, despite that difference, it's quintessential in a way. Like, I think this is regarded as one of the great I Love Lucy episodes. That's the impression I got when I was, you know, trying to cull episodes for this. But yeah, it definitely, I would say, for example, the Superman episode is probably more of like a big deal, or like we watched one
because they had the guest star.
Yeah. I don't remember what happened on all the I Love Lucy episodes we watched, but yeah, I feel like this stands out as a good one, but not like a super special one. So, all right. Well, now that we're moving on, we're definitely going into the world of a much more self-conscious sort of official 100th episode. Let's talk about Frasier.
Season 5, episode 4, The 1000th Show.
Yeah, so this is one where, you know, this is the same thing that they did in 30 Rock, basically, for their 100th episode. If you're making a show about people making a show of sometimes and you want to celebrate an anniversary, have them have an anniversary inside the show, right? But Frasier is, I guess, a daily radio broadcast, right? So for this to make sense, it has to be their 1000th episode of, what is Frasier's show called? Do we know that?
Oh, I don't know.
Mysteries of the Mind.
I think it's no, I don't think it's that at all. I think, you know, his tagline is "I'm listening." So I think it's just, you know, the Dr. Frasier Crane show or something.
Gotcha. Well, this one, it starts in the coffee shop. I believe this was one of our
nominees
always
do.
For our best hangouts. And this is a very straightforward sitcom-y story, and I say that in the best way possible. I feel like this is a nice thing to hang your hat on. It starts with Frasier is being accosted by his fans, right? People are recognizing him in the coffee shop, and Niles is jealous, and this is all going to be about Frasier's 1000th episode is coming up, and he doesn't want them to make a big deal of it. Oh, it's so embarrassing that they're probably going to want to do some sort of special thing, throw some sort of party, or have some special event or something. And isn't all that hoopla so tacky and stupid? And that's not why I do it. And, you know, he's doing all of this sort of like, oh, I'm too respectable for that.
Right.
And in reality, that's exactly what he wants.
Yes, exactly. And so that opening scene, the barista knows Frasier's order, but doesn't know Niles's order. And they're there every day, every morning. They order the same thing. So Niles gets his little, you know, panties in a twist about that. And then we see that kind of play out throughout the episode where he's jealous of the attention that Frasier's getting for this, you know, 1000th episode and wanting the same sort of accolades in his own career. And then towards the end, he comes up with like, oh, look, I was mentioned in Psychology Today as an author of one of these papers. And it just so happens that at that same time, Frasier's sort of machinations at his work have now turned into that the entire city is proclaiming that weekend or whatever, Frasier Crane Day.
Yeah, that's because when he first came in, Roz told him, don't worry, you know, they called and asked if you wanted a celebration for your 1000th episode, and I shared with them your wishes that you think that's all tacky.
Yeah, she totally calls his bluff. She knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
Because she knows he really wants it.
Yeah, and then he has to go like, well, don't I owe it to the people, or, you know,
yeah,
he makes up some phony thing.
And he kind of twists, he turns it around and he's like, well, you know, I mean, something small wouldn't be bad. And I do understand that the people want to celebrate. And so then she hears what he's saying. She, you know, calls them back. She gets gets it done. And now it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So the mayor's going to be there. They're going to give him a key to the city. It's going to be proclaimed Frasier Crane Day. And Niles walks in with this big announcement. And he's like, I know I've been feeling a little jealous of you recently, Frasier, but look at my big announcement. And it's like he's the last author at the bottom of the article of this, in this obscure psychology journal.
We've got 2 weeks in a row now. Last week we had Dick from Third Rock in the Sun saying I was published in a collegiate article or something, and it was his picture
yearbook,
in the yearbook. In this one, it is at least in an academic context, but it's Niles being mentioned
as one of
in
the authors.
A footnote in this publication. So it is, kind of a stretch.
And so the whole you've got Daphne's there, and Martin, Frasier's dad, is there, and they are hearing him go on about this after having just heard about Frasier's huge event. And everyone is just like, oh, Niles, that's so nice. And they decide, what, we're just not going to talk about what's happening with Frasier's upgrades in terms of everything, because we don't want to take him back to like the jealous side of things. So then in the next scene, Niles has now heard about it, and he just keeps sniping. He keeps being like, oh, I forgot to send my Frasier Crane Day cards.
Yes. He gets some very funny little barbs, like of mocking the notion of Frasier Crane Day as a holiday.
What is the greeting? Do we say Merry Frasier Crane Day? Do we say Happy Frasier Crane Day? How do we greet one another? Is it a bank holiday? Will we have the day off? Like, he has all of these little things. And, and he's trying to play it off like he's not saying that because he's jealous, but Frasier knows that's why he's doing it. So everyone's just kind of letting it go. But David Hyde Pierce, is perfect at playing those kinds of roles. So it's very funny.
Yeah. And then the whole second half of the show is going to be Frasier and Niles going to this, they're having the event at the town or the Space Needle.
Yeah, they're having it at the park in front of the Space Needle.
Seattle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what is special about this episode, right, is that they shot it on location in Seattle.
They sure did. This episode turns into a single camera sitcom.
And they have all of they have them walking through the streets of Seattle. They go to Pike's Place. They go to the market, that big open air market that they have in Seattle where they throw the fish, and Niles almost gets hit by a fish, and he spills coffee on Frasier's shoes, and then Frasier's so vain that he spends 45 minutes trying on shoes and eventually buys a pair that's too small.
Niles gets to say the line. I love, every episode of Frasier, you've got to have your little Niles and Frasier's vocabulary moments. He says, "Never in my life have I heard such caterwauling over a pair of shoes."
Because they were suede shoes, and now there's coffee on them. So it really is a celebration and like a love letter to Seattle, the last half of the episode. And what paralleled with this is that, so September 11th, 1997 in Seattle was proclaimed Frasier Crane Day in real life. And so the very last scene in the show that we get to see, it's like an after credits little tag, is, remember the guys who the doo-wop group, the Acapellas or whatever their name were, the Rockapellas, they sang the Carmen Sandiego theme song. Well, so they joined Frasier on stage for an a cappella version of "Don't Know What to Do with My Tossed Salad and Scrambled Eggs."
Yeah, that's...
And so that was at the very, very end, but it's footage from the actual Frasier Crane Day.
That's interesting. Well, yeah, what's happening in the show is they're not making it. They're having this crazy misadventure, Frasier and Niles, and they're getting delayed. They're on the elevated train, and that's getting held up. Yeah,
that's like a quintessential Seattle thing that they are shouting out.
And I just, I'm always a nerd about the productions of these sitcoms, the single camera versus multi-camera. Is the audience real or not? And so this was wild. I guess this was at this time in the late 90s, like Friends was doing this sometime too, where it was primarily a multi-camera thing shot in some studio in LA, but it was shot on film. Just the technology in general, like these were top-notch NBC shows. And so when they did sort of take the crew out to a location like this, it wasn't like when Benson or Full House goes to Hawaii and all of a sudden it looks like it's shot with a camcorder. Like they sort of smoothly transition into like, it looks more like 30 Rock or the shows that would come later, where it kind of looks like a movie, but the shows already looked pretty good even when they were bound in the apartment. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is it's both like a little bit strange to see them out on streets and they're clearly really streets and everything. And yet like it doesn't clash as much as when those 80s sitcoms or even the crappy 90s sitcoms would try to take the show on the road.
For sure. And this one is like, again, this is what we were talking about. They went to Seattle. They shot this on location. They made it special because they were doing it for the 100th show. This was like they were trying to be, exciting and new and different and special. So Frasier doesn't make it to his celebration. They're on the monorail and it's right before they get to the station where they need to get to, and they're having an electrical problem. So he's like up against the monorail window looking out at his rally, and he's been on the phone with Roz, and everything has gotten started without him. He had his dad go up and make a little speech, and they've been...
his dad is reading jokes that he wrote, that Frasier wrote. So nobody likes them. You get a reaction shot from the dog, like grimacing when the dad's reading the bad
like
jokes.
Covering his face. Yeah. So the rally has started. The broadcast has started without him. He's not going to make it. Their monorail gets turned around and has to go back to the last station. So he knows now he's not even going to get there, in time. So then they get off of the monorail and they're like, well, let's cut through this alleyway and then we can run. And then they get mugged in the alleyway. And so now they don't even have a cell phone anymore to be able to call Roz and let her know that they're not going to make it. Frasier starts running and his feet hurt. And so, cause he's got these shoes that are too small. And then,
at some point they steal a quarter from a blind man. Is that before or after? Cause that was one of the funniest moments.
It's after.
Okay.
There's a musician like busking on the street and he's blind, and they're like, well, we have to call Roz. So like Frasier creates a distraction and then Niles picks up the quarter.
Yeah, but Niles goes, when Frasier suggests it, he says, you can't be serious. He's blind. And Frasier goes, I know, it's the first break we've had all day.
Yes, exactly. And then schoolgirls see it happen, so they start chasing them.
Yes.
So then they're running and running, trying to get away from these schoolgirls. They think they've lost them. Niles is like, oh, I can't run anymore. He's like having a hard time breathing. And Frasier goes out to the street and just happens to like come upon a guy that's a chauffeur. And he's like, hey, are you trying to get somewhere? I'll take you there for free. It's fine. And it seems a little weird and a little magical. Like, who's this guy? Is he gonna? And so he decides not to wait for Niles.
Yeah, he says, the guy goes, what about your friend? Do we need to wait for him? And Frasier goes, he'll be all right. He's got street smarts.
So off they go, and I keep waiting for that next shoe to drop. Like, this guy's gonna, he's telling him this sob story, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's gonna go drive off a bridge or something. Like, that's what's happening here. This is awful. But he's telling him this sob story, and Frasier gets more and more sucked in to, like, being the therapist in this moment.
Frasier starts listening to him, giving him advice. The driver is saying, I'm upset because my wife, whatever his thing is, and Frasier is being a therapist.
Yeah.
And this, in true sitcom style, this is reminding Frasier of why he got into this in the first place, helping people.
And exactly. And so it's going back to what he had said, that he didn't need all the pomp and circumstance because he does this for the people, but then he got wrapped up in his own ego in the way that Frasier always does. And so they get to the rally and there's still 5 or so minutes left. He could absolutely go and make the appearance. And he says to the chauffeur, you know what? Let's just, take another lap. I'm really enjoying, I want to hear more about your story. And so the guy turns around and he gives him like a whole free therapy session right there. And that's the end of the episode. Right.
That's the last note of the episode, except like you mentioned before, the little post-credits thing where Kelsey Grammer is singing with rockapella from Carmen Sandiego. But we didn't mention while they were still stopped on the monorail, Frasier and Niles have a little heart-to-heart where, everything kind of kind of slows down, and Niles says, oh, I've been jealous. And Frasier says, oh, I made up this whole Frasier Crane Day. I asked for it. It's all just my vanity. And then, in the end, again, it's a very sitcom-y story, but I like it. Like, it works. This idea that he was, sort of blustery and vain. And this guy, him seeing a way to help somebody, is more important than attending his
than actually getting
rally.
To the rally.
Yeah, I think all in all, this is really good. This is really clever, the way that not just did they use the show within the show to kind of make a fun premise for the 100th episode. They used the setting, like you said, knowing that, these shows are always set in these cities, but we never actually go there. We shoot these whole things inside studios. So to have that aspect of it, and to have it maybe actually be, sitcom-y as it is, more of a sort of like weighty story maybe than your average Frasier episode. Like, I think this is all good. This works without being super serious or like a super long thing or anything.
No, they did it. It was a very like nice way to say, thank you to Seattle for being our hometown, even though we're never there.
Yeah.
and like highlighting some of the businesses that are there that they never actually show because they have their, fake versions of the, random coffee shops that, aren't real, but just like reminiscent of. And so, and then also I thought it was really fun that the town, like the actual mayor did actually give Kelsey Grammer a key and have a Frasier Crane Day celebration, like not Kelsey Grammer celebration, a Frasier Crane Day.
Well, let's move on to the 21st century with The Middle.
Season 5, episode 4, The 100th.
Yep. So both of these last two shows are going to start with a parent giving us a explanatory voiceover. In this one, we've got Patricia Heaton from Everyone Loves Raymond, right? She's the mom in this.
But also from The Middle, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the dad is the janitor from Scrubs.
Yep.
So mom is giving us a voiceover explaining about the Orcentennial, the 100th anniversary of their town. That's going to be this show's clever sort of way in to the 100th episode.
Exactly, to celebrate the 100th while also celebrating the 100th for the characters. So all of the, they've got the three kids. They've got the oldest, Axel. The middle one is Sue. And the youngest one is Brick. Axel's the cool one. Sue is the, like, try hard. She signs up for everything and is, like, always a joiner. And then Brick is, like, the little weird sort of kind of autistic one, but he is also kind of very serious about the things that he tackles.
Very earnest.
Yeah.
So this is, like we said, the town is turning 100. We're going to get a quick flashback because this is an early 2000s show. So we're going to get the quick little flashback scenes to the barbecue where the parents drunkenly agreed to drive the float in the Centennial.
Right.
That's going to be sort of the A
like
story.
the biggest float that is the last float of the parade. It's the cow.
Yeah.
And so they have to be like inside these tiny little compartments, one person being the eyes, the other person being the driver, and they have to communicate back and forth to each other. So they have a funny line like, oh, this is why we shouldn't drink because we end up volunteering for things or getting brick.
Yeah.
And so the whole town is coming out. Everybody's involved in this 100th day celebration. The parents are going to be driving this float that they don't really want to drive. Axel and his friends are home from college for whatever time of year it is, and they are trying to set up a VIP area to make money. And Brick is entering the town slogan contest and doing a lot of research and trying to find like the best slogan that really speaks to who the town is. And Sue she's trying to get her boyfriend Daryl back. Right?
Yeah. She's trying. Yeah, he's not her. She's got some new girlfriend, and so before the Orcentennial, she's like doing opposition research by going to get her hair done.
Right. Well, and her whole thing, as she normally is like, hey, you know what? If he wants to be with her, then it's probably for everything happens for a reason. It's probably right. So she meets her and is like fully prepared to like her and is excited about it. And the girl is just like, yeah, I like his arms.
Yeah, she keeps asking, what do you love? What do you like about Daryl? What is his, what is so special about him? And the girl can only say physical things.
Right.
She keeps saying he's hot. And then like, but what else? She's like, well, his arms. And she's like, that falls under being hot.
Physical characteristics, anything else. So then she's talking to her gay bestie. Sue is talking to her gay bestie about like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, the best way to get a guy back is to make them jealous. And so we're gonna make him the most jealous.
Yes, and we, the audience, don't know what their plan is. They're hatching a plan. I also want to say, she does, like I said, she got her hair done by his girlfriend.
Oh, yeah. And they're like, I mean, she's unequivocally an amazing hairdresser.
Yeah, her hair looks like something from like Steel Magnolias.
It looks like Honey Boo Boo. Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. It looks like
gigantic Southern Belle hair.
It's just,
or something.
gigantic. This is Midwest, right? That's why it's called the middle. They're in the middle of the country.
And this isn't a old, like a period piece show from, okay.
No, this is like that. It is pageant hair. That's what I would call it, right? And your Steel Magnolias is a great reference. It's like how they would pile her hair up on top of her head, Julia Roberts for her wedding day, and all the curls cascading down and everything. It's so like, to me, pageant hair. Like if you watch, old pageants or whatever, that's what your hair would look like.
Yeah. And so Sue loves this new hair, but that's beside the point.
She's like, wouldn't it be great if I could do this to myself? Oh,
yeah. So they're hatching a plan to get the boyfriend back. They have this little sort of like town hall meeting or whatever before the proper Orcentennial, where they're going to unveil who won the county slogan contest. Yep. They're going to have the pie eating contest, whatever. Now, I want to back up and ask, did you have anything like this where you grew up? I grew up in a suburb of the city. There was no like town pride. We didn't have events like this. It was like a bunch of little towns next to each other that you didn't really know where one started and the other stopped. Like there was nothing like this.
Yeah.
Did you have any town anniversaries or little county parades, things like that?
Right. So where I grew up, they always had like a 4th of July parade. That was like a big deal. And each of the different cities, like there was a bunch of cities that are kind of all sort of close to each other in the county where I grew up. And yeah, everybody would have like a different parade, like a, Veterans Day parade or a 4th of July parade, and the local high schools and kids and all, like my dance troupe, we would always be involved. That was sort of my growing up kind of connection with it. But after graduation, after I graduated from college, I moved to a very small town. We've talked about this, in North Florida, which was like a total culture shift for me, right? It was like I moved from a very purple area to a very red area. Yeah. And every little teeny community had a parade for everything. And I was a local reporter, so I covered them. So there's a town called Wausau in North Florida that the only way it survived the Depression was that the locals started eating possum, because there wasn't enough food and nobody had any jobs, but there were possums aplenty. And so every year they have a parade and a pageant and a whole big old fair over a weekend for Possum Festival.
Like a possum eating contest?
And they 100% have possum. They also auction off live possum that the governor, every year when every time there's a governor's race, all the people that are running for the governor will come down and bid and usually win possum. So Jeb Bush, who was the president's brother and the governor of the state of Florida for a time when I was living in this area, came and bid on possums. And then for the next 4 years or more, all the possum's babies that possum that he won at auction had, they were like, oh, it's the grandchild of the governor's possum. And they would those would go for more money. I mean, it was all all a fundraiser. Nobody was like actually keeping these possums. Anyway, that's this festival. So have I been to these crazy little small town, think Pawnee from Parks and Rec type festivals? Yes, I've been to all of them because I had to cover them as a local TV reporter.
All right. Asked and answered. So yeah, I feel like around here, it's not as much. We have parades, of course, but there isn't that sense of pride,
right?
Because you're sort of within spitting distance of one of the biggest cities in the world. People go down there to work. It's not the same thing. But yeah, that's what this is all going to be about. And the one thing I thought was probably pretty true to some of these small town worlds is that in addition to the mayor, you've got Brian Doyle Murray playing this like local car tycoon, right? The guy who runs like so-and-so's auto motors or something. And he's the sponsor of the whole event. And so he's the one who's sort of officially in charge.
And he always kind of plays this same sort of guy.
Yeah, he was
car dealership.
Well, it's funny because he's Noah. He's from Noah's Arcade in Wayne's World, which is exactly this thing.
Yeah.
The sponsor. Yeah, that's funny. But so he's the one that gets to announce the winner of the slogan contest. Now, we should say that the little kid Brick, his whole angle, right, he's been brainstorming all these different ideas for the slogan. He does this research and discovers, this town, Orson, it came to be because there was like a false gold rush where this guy discovered some sort of gemstone.
Discovered an emerald,
Yeah, they thought there'd be buried treasure, so everyone came to move here, but then there turned out not to be any, but they stayed anyway. And so the idea that he comes up with is something, a hidden gem.
Yeah, Orson, a hidden gem, the Midwest hidden gem.
The
or something
Midwest's
like that.
hidden gem. Yeah. Yeah, but that's his idea, and he's shocked and scandalized when they announce the winner is Orson. Why not?
Right, exactly. So Brick's all disappointed, and then you've got Frankie is the mom, Mike is the dad. You have Frankie and Mike, they're, on their walkie-talkies driving and guiding this float down the parade route, and they get into a full-on argument over the walkie-talkie. But before that, we find out that the only reason they wound up in this town in the first place was because they had been on their way to Chicago when they were young and in love and first got married, and they were going to go move to the big city. And they get almost all the way there, and they realize that their U-Haul that they have all their world packed into is missing a gas cap.
Yeah, this is all in a story they're talking about because they because they agreed to this thing, they have to camp out by this parade
night,
float.
And
so
not let anybody vandalize the float overnight.
Right. So they're having this nice little quiet, camp out moment, basically, with the sleeping bag and everything, and they're reminiscing. And that's how they got on the story of how they came in the first place because of the missing gas cap. They had to come back to this small town. And then the dad reveals...
Yeah, he reveals that there wasn't ever a missing gas cap. He was just scared of moving to the big city. And Frankie's like, well, I was scared too. You should have been honest with me. And he's like, are you mad? And she's like, no, I'm just, I love this town. I'm glad we're here, and they, like you're talking about that feeling of pride in your tiny little town and the little world that you've created for yourself. And there's something like, I want to kind of focus on that for a second because there's something really special about that. And what you're talking about with living up here in Westchester and how that doesn't exist because of the proximity to the city. And that's true for a lot of places that are, considered like the coastal liberal elite places. They don't have this pride in their hometown. And I can tell you from going, like I've mentioned before, to many, many of these festivals, it feels nice. Like even if I wasn't a member of that little town or that little community that was having the festival, it is a nice feeling to be a part of something, right? To like have pride and take a little bit of ownership in the happy place that you live. And there, like society is at a detriment by not paying attention to that. There truly is something special about that the people who live in places like this have not had the chance to experience, and you're missing out.
Yeah, no, and that's sort of what they realize, and they say like, yeah, we're happy in our choices. We wouldn't have, been happy in Chicago, and it's all nice and peaceful. And then there's a hard cut to the next morning where the organizer lady is blasting the thing in their faces, and it's like, yeah, get up, you got to man the float. And this would be my nightmare. I would not be able to do this, going inside these little compartments that they have to get into underneath the float.
Well, you're not flexible.
It.
So you wouldn't be able to turn yourself into a tiny little ball to do it anyway.
Definitely not.
And you're very tall and long legged.
Well, this dad
so
guy
is the
looks
dad.
pretty tall.
Yeah, he was too. But he was like, I can't move. Frankie keeps being like, oh, I need to reposition. My legs are asleep. Oh, I can't sit like that. And he's like, good for you. You're even able to move. Like, I'm in one position. That's all I got. Just be my eyes and stop complaining.
Yeah.
And they get into this argument over the walkie-talkies, and they're like talking shit about the woman who is running the thing, and her name was Nancy or whatever. And so they were talking shit about Nancy. They're talking shit about this other guy, Bill, who's like one of their town people, and all of them are on the walkie-talkies, and they're not on a private channel.
Classic hot mic situation. Yep, they're talking about everyone else. I love how the parade is being led by Brian Doyle Murphy. He's on the front car with the megaphone going. He's talking about, and come and get some good old-fashioned gas, right? None of that foreign electricity to power
That's right.
your cars.
Yeah, foreign electricity. That's where it's coming from.
Yeah, and so, I'm a sucker for this sort of story trope, this idea of just like an event with all these different things going on at the same time. The last act of this is the proper parade with, like you said, you got mom and dad doing the float. That's their job. One gets to see, the other gets to drive, so they have the comedy of having to communicate with each other over the walkies. You've got the older brother is trying to be Mr. Capitalist entrepreneur. He's trying to sell VIP seats, and the only ones that want to buy them are the sister and the gay best friend. And
yes, because
means
they're using it to make the guy Darren jealous.
Right.
And so that's when we get to see what their actual plan is.
This was a pretty funny moment.
Which is, their plan is like, nothing makes men more jealous than you being all in on a show tune with another guy.
Yeah. Well,
so they sing Summer Lovin'.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to make out. He's like, I know how to make a man jealous. And they get all in each other's faces. And you're thinking like, okay, the only question is, will he buy that this guy isn't gay?
Right.
And then
they're like, Summer Lovin', had me a blast. And they start singing, and it's very funny. And the guy, Darren, is like, what is happening? He's confused. And then Brick is, he's been pouting on the stands. He goes to sit on the bleachers to watch the parade and just kind of pout. And he's, kind of yelling at all the people around him for being plebes and like, of course you don't even care. You just want a t-shirt. And then he sees the t-shirt and he's like, I'm a sucker for a good font.
Yeah.
Damn you, sans serif.
Yeah, which is a little annoying to me from a graphic design nerd point of view, because sans serif isn't really a font. It's just
it's a
type kind of
it's
font.
A type of font.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wish, if he were really that into fonts, he should know which one it was. But anyway, this is all very funny, having all of these things going on all within like 100 feet of each other, and just seeing like all these different points of view.
Right. So then the guys, Axel and his friends who are doing the VIP section, they keep trying to like up the ante because nobody wants to pay for those seats.
Yeah.
And so they've like strung electrical power strips and extension cords over the parade route, up in the air, and are now grilling. And have like a microwave going on over in their little section that they're making, they're making things, they're heating things up and making popcorn and whatever. And so the cow is the tallest float. It's the last float, and its horns get stuck on these electrical wires that Axel and his friends have strung across the parade route. And it immediately like bursts and arcs.
Catches fire.
Pandemonium. Exactly. And the cow is on fire. fire. And the two people that they were talking shit about over the walkie-talkies are now standing in front of the float, like making all these, and they've switched to a different channel so they can't hear them. And they're trying to stop the float. And Patricia Heaton's character keeps being like, I don't know which way to tell you to go. There's these people standing in the way and they keep waving and Nancy's being crazy and I don't know what's happening. And then finally she hears them say fire and she was like, oh, there's a fire.
At the same time as the smoke is starting to get into their little boxes down
into
there.
the dad's box in the back. So they get out and he gets her out, but they don't stop the float. Like it's set in motion. So it keeps on moving and they eventually, like, the town sort of starts to corral it over to the local pool and they push it into the local pool so it'll stop being on fire.
Yeah. You've got all this chaos going on that was, all started because of this electrical wire and everything's catching fire. We didn't mention before, one of their selling points of this festival is they've got the area's number 4 John Cougar Mellencamp impersonator.
That's right.
Ron
Cougar Mellencamp.
And so he is unaccounted for when the fire breaks out. So the organizer lady, Nancy Donahue, is running around going, where's Ron Cougar Mellencamp? Does anyone have eyes on Ron Cougar Mellencamp? And then, it ends, the little tag at the credits is Ron Cougar Mellencamp performing in their centennial celebration. The fire wasn't that bad.
That's right. Well, and we forgot the part where the cow, before they start corralling it to get it to the swimming pool and they're just throwing water onto it, it is heading right for Sue.
For Sue, she's paralyzed with fear.
Darren comes running and scoops her up out of the way and he sets her down. He's like, are you okay? And she's like, I'm fine. And then she looks at her gay bestie and she's like, oh, there's still hope.
Yes. So she has this very sort of deranged, relationship with this guy, and him saving her from the fire has given her more hope for the future. And this was fun. Like I said, I like this idea of just like this big event and all these different angles on it. I think that's always kind of a fun way for a story to be. And it was also kind of clever the way, they have it be about the town. And so they made it a little special in the sort of human way by having them reflect on their sort of origin story a little bit. They didn't have to make a whole 2-part thing where you get to see flashbacks and everything, but they just kind of had that part where they talk about why they came here and, he reveals his little secret. And this was good. I don't think this was an amazing event, but I think they did a good job of kind of elevating their 100th episode.
Yeah, exactly. And doing the town celebration and them being able to take a moment to reflect on why they're there and that they actually do like it and all of that, because so much of the show is them just like, oh, our kids are annoying. Why is our life a mess? We're not bad parents, but we're not good parents. That's the whole shtick of the show. And so it was nice. It was a nice little moment of celebration within the celebration.
Yeah. All right. Let's finish it up with Blackish.
Season 5, Episode 4, Purple Rain.
Yep, so we're continuing with the Season 5, Episode 4 thing. But in a sense, I feel like we're sort of back to Lucy in the way of this just kind of being a little bit special, but they're not doing anything with the 100th episode concept in this show.
No, but this is a totally different episode of Blackish.
Yeah, it is special in certain ways.
It's a bottle episode.
Yes.
It's each one of them is telling their story. They have Lawrence Fishburne who plays Pops. He's Dre's dad. The main guy, Anthony Anderson, is Dre. So he's his dad, and then Ruby is his mom. And so they've got his parents there, and the whole family is in town. You've got the daughter back from college and the older son. Junior is there and the 2 younger kids. And now they also have a baby because we're in season 5. And that's how you do.
The baby that does not show up until the very last shot of this.
No, the baby is in the kitchen earlier on in a high chair.
I'll take your word for it.
But not a central part of the episode, just sort of there.
No, he's little Ricky.
Every single person has their own little moment where they get to like imagine themselves
Yes, a
in a
fantasy
Prince
moment.
Yeah, in a Prince video.
Yeah, and I guess, only having watched this a couple times, we should back up and say this is our third time covering Blackish, I think. And we really like this show. This is one of our best discoveries.
100%. This show is not one of them. This episode was a disappointment.
Oh, really?
In terms of like, normally I love this show. Normally it's very funny with the way that they have the characters interacting and the dynamics within the family. And this one felt very like old-fashioned to me. This one was like, yeah, I used to like Prince, and Prince was such a major part of my life, and you kids are gonna like Prince too, and now let's just do some fantasy sequences of all of us being Prince.
Yeah, fair enough. Again, we can get into like how we reacted to this
and
story.
no Dion Cole till the very end. And I love him.
Dion Cole, didn't show up in this one. He played a big part in the first episode of this we watched. But just in general, look, if I'm going to criticize the Steven Webbers of the world for not having the Riz, for not being compelling, I got to make sure I call out when these shows are so good like that. This cast is just like this. I'm all in. I love all of these performers. They're just so fun, and in ways that are really perfect for a sitcom. So for example, like again, last time I was saying how John Lithgow, love him as an actor. I'm starting to realize he doesn't work for me at all as the lead of that show, Third Rock from the Sun. Inversely, Anthony Anderson is not someone I get excited about when he turns up in a movie or something, but he is perfect as the dad on this show. These kids are really, really good. I think they really dodged a bullet. This is the 5th season, so these were kids that were cast when they were, 8, 9, something like that.
Yeah.
And now they're in the awkward teenage years. They're still very cute and funny, and just the wife, everyone on this is really, really good.
Yeah, you
and
got Lawrence Fishburne playing the dad.
Yeah. Well, and he's another one that, to be totally honest, I know it's controversial, but he is not my favorite actor in a lot of things.
Yeah.
But again, like, he works in this. And I think the fact that this show, despite all the fantasy stuff in this one, being a little bit post 30 Rock, quick cutaway type things, being a little more settled in its mise en scène, like all of that works for me. I think this is really high quality, and I didn't have that same reaction of this one being not as good. I definitely saw that it was different, but I guess I had read the blurb. I knew what it was going to be about. I figured this was probably around the time that he died, maybe a little, I don't know, maybe a little after.
Who died?
Prince. I don't think it was like a very special episode, like ripped from the headlines right afterwards.
Yeah.
But, like maybe a few years after he died. When
it was 2 years.
Yeah, fair enough. And so I think that for whatever reason, like, the feelings about Prince, and we can definitely get into our own personal feelings about the man, because I have some.
Yes.
Like, that all felt very genuine, and I just kind of took away from it like, I guess the people who make this show really like Prince, and they just decided to make a, kind of weird episode about it.
Yeah, okay. So I was expecting something along the lines of like the New Girl episode that had Prince. That was a very special, like, celebration episode. In fact, I went to look it up. I was like, was that the 100th episode? Did they also do a Prince? It's not. But the 100th episode for New Girl doesn't happen until way late. Like, that was, obviously it always happens in season 5 nowadays. And so that episode with Prince and New Girl was like season 3 or something. So yeah, I don't know. I found the idea that the special episode, in quotes, that they were doing as a celebration, as something totally different, I felt like they always are good. This show is always engaging, captivating, funny, witty. Like it always is those things. And so their decision to just do something sort of staid, like a bottle episode where everyone gets a fantasy sequence, which is very tropey, as their special episode, to me felt like a step down instead of a step up.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. I think that there was still a little bit of the old-timey sitcom mentality in terms of like the costume. Like, I think it's just a little bit of a celebration in that way. Like, if you're a fan of the show, maybe, and certainly if you're one of the people on the show, just all these crazy
it's 100% fun for them to do.
Like,
everybody got to be Prince for a moment and lip sync to one of Prince's songs.
And like we always say, it looks great on the commercial. It looks great on This Week on Blackish, and you showed the little girl dressed up in the Purple Rain thing, and Anthony Anderson dressed up with the bandana and everything, the half shirt, and it's just like it's a very easy
so funny.
sell.
The first one that they did was it Raspberry Beret? Is that song, or Little Red Corvette or something? But so he was wearing Anthony Anderson.
It's Kiss.
It's Kiss. Is that they all blur together in my mind? But so he's wearing the same outfit that Prince wears, and then Bo, Tracy Ellis Ross's character, she is playing the
girl, right,
woman, the woman in the video that is like his bassist or his lead guitarist or something in his band. And so she's in that whole getup, and she looks fabulous. And then Anthony Anderson comes in the little midriff shirt and low-rise pants, except for he doesn't have Prince's tiny little frame. So he's doing this with his big like Santa belly, and it is so funny. You even catch Tracy Ellis Ross, like when she's looking at him, staring at his belly as it jiggles. It is so funny. Yeah,
so let's just make it plain in case it's unclear. The premise of this episode is basically that it comes out that the younger two kids, right, they don't know Prince. They've never heard of him. They come across all the parents and everything having a fun dance party in the kitchen.
Right, the parents and their older siblings are like getting down in the kitchen to one of Prince's songs. I can't remember now. And they're all having a good time. They're like, okay, let's go. It's that song. And they're having a good time. And they come in and they're like, all right, olds, like, what are you boomers doing? Like basically making fun of the parents. And the grandparents look at Dre and they're like, what's wrong with your kids? Why don't your kids have an appreciation for Prince? And then the other two older kids are like, whoa, don't lump us in there. And so then it's like family meeting, and they all go into the living room and they sit down. The two younger kids, Jack and Diane are their names, which is funny.
Oh, so two John Cougar Mellencamp things right after each other. Yeah. I was going to say, this girl seemed very young to be a Diane. I don't think a lot of people naming their kids Diane in the 2000s.
I know. Well, and the older kids are Zoe and Junior. But anyway, I just always thought it was funny that those younger two kids, and I don't know what the baby's name is, but the younger two kids are named Jack and Diane. So they're sitting them down and they're like, all right, listen, you are not leaving this family meeting until you love Prince.
Yeah, and then each family member in turn talks about what Prince meant to them, their sort of personal connection, and they get a little fantasy sequence where the show restages one of Prince's iconic music videos with that family member as Prince.
Yes.
So this is where I feel like we should back up a little and talk about our own feelings about Prince. The man, the myth, the legend, the guy who briefly became a symbol, a hieroglyph in the late 90s. Yes, they talk
about that as well. Like he paved the way for the Taylor Swift versions of everything in his way.
Very beloved musician in our lifetimes. As Lawrence Fishburne's character points out, he won numerous music awards and an Oscar, presumably for music for one of his movies. So what's your feelings on Prince? You like him. I don't feel like I hear a lot of Prince, blasting around the house much.
That's because you're the one that plays music in the house, not me. When I play music, it is musical theater. But yeah, no, Prince has always been on heavy rotation in my playlist. I enjoy him very much. I found him strange when I was a kid, just because he was so tiny and so sexual. And I would just as a kid, because he was very famous in the 80s and 90s when I was young, as a kid growing up, I was like, why is this little man licking everything? I just was confused by his very overt sexuality. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, that's just rock stars. And then I loved the Bangles. And then you hear all these stories about how Prince always had his girl that he was controlling. And she was his little marionette that he was kind of taking through the music business. And the girl who's the lead singer of the Bangles was one of those girls. And I think he wrote Manic Monday or Walk Like an... He wrote one of their big hits. I can't remember which one it was now. And so, all of that stuff. And so as a musician, as a creator, I think he's amazing. All of these people, the power corrupts. And so, of course, there's the problematic things that have come out in the years since. But, in terms of his music, big fan.
Yeah, I never really got into Prince. I was a big fan of the Batman soundtrack with Bat Dance and Party Man and his contributions to that film. But yeah, I think
his most celebrated music for sure, Jay.
Look, he's a virtuosic musician, but I think my tastes in music were always kind of basic, and he didn't have catchy
he's into
songs.
funk, and I have always kind of been into funk.
Right.
So
he also weaved a little bit around, he was a big deal before we got into music, and then he came back. He was a big deal in the late 90s again, but I think in my formative years, when I was first starting to listen to music, getting into Paula Abdul and whatnot, I feel like he wasn't super active at that time, maybe?
Well, he was, because and what you're talking about is kind of my middle schoolish era, and that was the 7 album. Remember that? The 7 and we'll watch them fall.
Well, no, I don't. Because
I was super into that album. That was around the same time that the Janet Jackson album with the guy holding her boobs came out. And those were my middle school music was that Janet Jackson album, 7, the Hero from Mariah Carey. I was super into all
I had
that.
that Janet Jackson album, but would not listen to Prince. And part of it, again, wasn't really my kind of music, but also what you said about the sexuality. I was always just baffled by this guy's
Jay.
persona. Yeah, I think I was more threatened by him. I'm just this guy is the exact opposite of me. I am this tall, gangly, white, doofus, and this guy is this tiny, sort of, what's the word you would use? He's kind of moist and sinewy.
He's sweaty.
Yeah, and just his whole vibe was so mysterious and strange to me. And the one thing I knew is that women love him. He was just this super sexual being. And I remember.
So that's the thing. You and I have actually talked about this off mic, probably over a year ago, that you said your one thing about him was that women love him. And that was not my experience.
All right. It was my experience. Or just things and they reference this in the episode, the assless pants that he wore on the music awards and stuff. I was just who is this guy? Who does he think he is? And so, I was, even though I like a handful of his songs, I was never really into Prince, and just a little bit, like I said, just kind of baffled by him as a rock star and a personality. And so to wit, I only recognized 2 out of the like 5 or 6
wow.
songs
Wow.
that they do in this episode. The first one is Kiss, because it's Anthony Anderson saying that Prince gave him the courage basically to go to kiss the woman
Kiss
who would become his
Bo.
wife
Yeah,
on
kiss
their
Bo
first
on their first
date.
date. Yeah.
And so we get the little music video thing like you talked about, and then it's the wife's turn, and she does her fantasy sequence where she's Prince, but this was one where I didn't recognize the song.
Yeah.
And it sort of continues like that.
I didn't write them all down, so like I don't remember what all the different moments were. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't a song in here that I didn't recognize. I enjoyed it I enjoyed all those moments very much for exactly what they were. They were fun. They were, a little, but I stand by my initial kind of statement that this type of an episode for this show is a step down.
Yeah, it's hard to say what we think of it if it wasn't the 100th episode and was just like a random sort of change
fun,
of pace.
and it's still fun.
The fact that every character, as we said, gives their own perspective. So the older sister then goes on to explain how Prince awoke her social consciousness. Like it is, in so doing, it becomes a very well articulated case for Prince.
Oh, it absolutely does.
So
it's
I
like,
do
hey, you
think-
guys should go listen to some more Prince. And clearly, if you don't know all these songs, now we have to, once we get off this podcast recording and go listen. We're going to listen to Prince tonight because Jay needs an education. But no, I think absolutely. And then, so there is a little bit of plot in the show, right? That the youngest brother, Jack, is going to have a study date with this girl.
Yeah.
And she's on her way over.
Yeah, we see their
And
video call at the beginning.
Right. And he's like drawn in a pencil mustache that looks like Prince's. And so then she comes over and he has basically by this point in the episode, Diane, the younger daughter, is like, I'm all in. I think I get it. Like I get what you guys like Prince. I'm into it. And
she responds to Prince's darkness. That's how she gets in. All the while that they're lecturing them, the younger daughter starts looking up things online, and she's like, oh, I just learned that Purple Rain is all about like blood in the sky and stuff. And she gets her fantasy sequence where she's in the iconic Purple Rain outfit, the purple leather thing. And so that's her angle on Prince, is like, oh, he had this like dark, brooding sort of apocalyptic side.
Right. And he would like use his music as metaphors to talk about bad things that are happening.
1999 meant the end of the world.
Right. It was Armageddon. And so that's how she gets into it. But Jack is like, sorry, guys, family meeting's got to be over. I've got this date coming in. And also I'm not sold. And then the date shows up and he's like, oh God, I'm going to crash and burn.
Yeah.
And then he has the same kind of thing that kicks into his mind.
It's a little swagger.
That happens to his dad. And he all of a sudden is like, in his mind, he goes into the Kiss, video and is like, oh, yeah, come on in.
It's that riff, that...
Yeah. And so he's like, come on in. And now he's super suave. So then we cut to later on after his little study date is over. She's gone home. He comes out to the back patio where his parents are sitting and they're playing, Dre is playing on his little mini keyboard, like his little lap keyboard, some Prince music, and they're singing. And then the younger son, Jack, comes out and he's like, I'm sold. Let me tell you about what just happened.
Yeah.
And so then they all start singing. And then that's when Jack realizes that the Sinead O'Connor song, Nothing Compares to You, that he really loves, was written by Prince.
Right.
So then they all do a sing-along
I was a
of that
little
song.
incredulous about this. Now, obviously, you encounter all kinds of things from before your time as a kid, but it seemed to be taken for granted that they knew Sinead O'Connor.
No, he was just playing another Prince song. And the kid, Jack, was like, wait a minute, that's not Prince,
but that's what I'm
Sinead
saying.
O'Connor.
That's what I'm saying. Why would Jack, the little boy, know about Sinead O'Connor?
Because that song had a huge resurgence when she died, and she had just died in 2018 when this happened.
Okay, fair enough. It's still, to me, I was hung up on that. I was thinking of course the kids don't know Prince, they definitely wouldn't know Sinead O'Connor. You're right, she did die, but I feel like
but
a
it
kid
doesn't
that
matter.
age,
Like that song, I mean, the kids I work with at school, like that had a huge kind of resurgence on
all right,
TikTok
fair
and
enough.
stuff.
I bumped on that as just like, oh, a 10-year-old kid in 2017 or whatever. I don't know that he would know that song either. Sinead O'Connor, of course, famously the pseudonym for Screech when he was going undercover
Right.
in the girls'
Yes,
locker room.
famously, exactly. Famously, just like you're saying, you're incredulous that people would know about, that kid would know about this song, but you're right. Everyone knows about Screech's fake name.
But anyway, yeah, before he came out, the parents, Dre and Bo, they had this heart-to-heart out on the back porch or whatever about how, all they can really do is expose the kids to the things that they like and kind of let them make their own choices. And so they had sort of settled like, yeah, look, I guess it's not the end of the world. And then, yeah, the little boy comes out, he says, I get it. And it was a stirring moment when the whole family gathers at the end and one by one they all join in and you have the whole cast of this show singing Nothing Compares to You to Dre's little Casio keyboard.
Yeah.
And it was nice. It was a nice, it was like an emotional ending.
Yeah, it really was. And I'm totally wrong on the dates. So that song, Nothing Compares to You, had its resurgence because Prince died, not because Sinead O'Connor died. Sinead O'Connor died in like 2024. So I was off on my timing. So yeah, he would have actually known that song and only knew that song because Prince died, but didn't know it was because Prince died.
Yeah.
That's the reason he knew that song. That's kind of funny. Anyway, so yeah, so like you said, it really was a stirring moment at the end. I did appreciate all of them singing together. It was nice.
And then just have to shout out, of course, the brain from Herman's head, right? The intellect
Right.
is
Peter
Dre's
Mackenzie
boss
is the
or his
boss.
colleague or whatever at work.
Yeah, it's
the
his
little
boss.
button at the end is that his two white pals from work haven't heard of Prince. That was dumb. That was just a silly little
I was like,
I could
who-
not believe that. Yeah,
Right.
you're not
Now,
gonna
look, you 100% could have it be like what you were just describing. Like, yeah, I know who Prince is, but no, I've never heard of that song.
But yeah,
Like,
they
I don't
keep
know
going,
this song, I don't know
Prince
that song.
who? The Prince of what?
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't believe that. But yeah, in general, I like this, I guess, a lot more than you did. Partially just because I really like this show, but also, yeah, for the reason I said. What I don't know is, again, this is a little bit after the 30 Rocks of the world. I feel like
this is 2018.
Right. So they've calmed down a little bit from that style of the quick cutaway scenes and everything. But we have watched this show a couple times. I know that it does have some little tricks up its sleeve in terms of that stuff. I guess what I'm wondering is how unusual was this for this show? The fantasy sequences,
It's totally
the little
different.
costume
Yeah.
things and stuff. I get that the show isn't normally let's all sit around and talk about. It's not Community. It's not make a whole
No,
show
exactly.
about Doctor Who.
But also just doing a bottle episode in general is not like the show's style.
No, it almost seems to me like what happened was when Prince died, someone wrote this episode, one person or a group of people or whatever, they liked it, and then just kind of like, for
Sat
whatever
on it
reason.
for 2 years?
Yeah, well, look, it takes time, with the
No,
way
but it
these
doesn't
things-
take 2.5 years.
that for whatever reason they decided like let's make this one the 100th episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I agree that it's a little strange that it was the 100th episode of this show. But
Yeah, I think they were trying not to do what everybody else always does now, like what Frasier in the Middle did, which was have some sort of like meta anniversary celebration within the show that the characters could, also be celebratory as well. I think they were making a very conscious choice not to do that, but they also wanted to do something special. And what they decided to do special is put everybody in different costumes and let them, lip sync to funny, to Prince songs.
Almost
and
like a
have moment.
Halloween episode
Yeah.
or something.
Everybody gets to have their special little moment. Even what's his face, Dion Cole,
Yes,
who
at the very
he
end.
gets yeah, exactly. He doesn't get a sequence. He just gets the tag, and he is wearing this like blue sky suit and starts singing one of the songs, and everybody's just like, okay, you're too much, because he was like doing the fantasy sequence in real life rather than in his mind, and everybody left the room because they were overwhelmed by it.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just Googling Prince blue cloud suit because
you want to know what that's actually from?
Yeah, Raspberry Beret. The
Yeah.
Raspberry Beret video, he's wearing, the suit with the blue clouds. Yeah, I mean...
It's all of the costumes were spot on. Anytime it was the song, they were wearing Prince's outfit from the video.
Yeah.
I just didn't write down like every single song they did, but I was enjoying it for all of those reasons.
Yeah, and I appreciated when the grandma talks. She's one of the last ones to share her perspective. And she says, what I related to is when I learned that Prince played every instrument on When Doves Cry. When Doves Cry is her little sequence. But they show how she's listening to that while she's taking care of the kid or whatever. And she's like, I was a single mom. I had to do everything. So the notion that this guy did everything on his songs was something I connected to. And, again, that's just all very well thought through. You know, if you're going to make a sitcom be a tribute to a music star, I feel like this did a good job of that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, and it was. It was a tribute to him, and there was a tribute to Prince. It gave every character a chance to put on a wacky costume and put on a wacky wig, do something a little bit different. It was very fun in that sense. But yeah, I was just I don't know. I was kind of hoping for something different. I do like the meta thing that the other shows did. So, I guess these people, like the people who are making Blackish, are kind of thinking that the stuff that I think is fun and interesting is actually old fashioned. And now we're in a world where like what they think is new and interesting is what I consider old fashioned. Yeah. Like I've aged myself out, I think, of what's hip.
Well, it all kind of comes around again. All right. What do we think overall? What are our favorites?
I loved the I Love Lucy episode. I thought it was really, really fun, that especially because it was different than regular I Love Lucy episodes where they had that whole extra act of her like not being believed in something happening, and they never resolved it. Like I Love Lucy always resolves. Yeah. She's like, "Oh, Ricky," or she always, owns up to it at the end.
Yeah, no, she's still tied up.
Right, exactly. And this one did not have, they didn't tie it into a nice little bow. They left her tied in knots.
Yeah, this was a very strong lineup to me. I really liked all of these. Again, like I said at the start, we can't really, track a trope any more than just what some of these later episodes thought would be good for a sort of special 100th thing. I really liked the way Frasier, just like we said, took the show to Seattle, kind of turned the whole second half of it into a little mini movie.
Like a walkabout, yeah.
Yeah, it reminded me of one of my favorite episodes of our podcast was the Cold War episode where we watched that double header of Head of the Class that I had on tape when I was a kid, and they went to Moscow.
Yep.
And Arvid and Dennis got lost, and they were lost on the subway, and one of them took a bicycle, and just that thing of being like having to get from point A to point B in the town.
Yes.
And the little misadventures that go wrong. That's a fun little trope. And, and the way that, he was sort of like George Jefferson style, kind of getting all full of himself and up his own ass. And then he, like they brought the story around by having him remember what it meant to be a therapist. Like that's all good, solid, fun sitcom stuff, not really punching above its weight class, but doing a good job of just kind of carrying out that story. And the middle, I really, like I said, I responded to that thing of like the parade and everything that's going on around it. And just like the way it was sort of slapsticky, but all the character stuff. Yeah, it was all really good. I see what you're saying about Blackish kind of being like the normal episodes kind of being better than this like weird side one. But yeah, that cast is just so solid. Those two kids are so funny. Those two young kids, like they really struck gold with them. I think.
They really did. They're that's the girl you quote all the time.
Yeah.
And she's much older now than she was in that episode that we talked about that very first time we watched Blackish. But she has kept that, like the personality and her just kind of very dry delivery. It's all still there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I'll give it to Frasier as my personal MVP, but these were all really solid. All right, so much for the 100th episode. Next week is going to be all about getting a dog. We have yet to narrow down our episodes. We're flying by the seat of our pants. But next week is all about dog episodes. Until then, we will consider this segment of the Sitcom Study concluded. Thank you for listening to the Sitcom Study. Tell us what you think or share your own TV tropes and topic ideas by sending a self-addressed stamped email to sitcomstudypodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you like the show, consider leaving a rating or review on your podcast app. It helps us boost those precious Nielsen ratings. The Sitcom Study is recorded in front of a live studio dog.